if you have Bibles with you, I want you to turn to the book of Revelation, chapter 3. If you have that on your phone or iPad, or if you even, I think we may, we might, do we have it printed in the bulletin? I remember Charity and I talked about it. Yeah, okay. So I don't have it in front of me, so no worries, but I do have it on my iPad. But we've been walking through a series called Are We Living in the End Times? It sure feels like that right now, doesn't it? Really a series in the book of Revelation. And the way this is going to work, if you're new with us or haven't been following along, we're going to be kind of back and forth in this book for a while. So we don't want to spend the whole time just going through the book straight through. We're going to get through probably the end of the churches. We might get to chapter 4, and then we'll switch off to another series for a little bit and kind of go back and forth throughout the year, getting through the rest of Revelation. But I want to make sure we're faithful to some other things as well, trying to work in a series next about equipping and empowerment and service, and we're going to kind of dive into that, especially trying to be creative during a pandemic, what that looks like. So to really tap into, and I have a little bit of a different take. I call it more holistic take on gifts and such, but that involves a little more than just let's take a spiritual gifts inventory, but there's a lot more to it than that. But I want to get into that a little bit and then kind of jump back and forth between that and Revelation. So we want to get through the churches, so we got 2 more letters to go. We got today Philadelphia, and then we got Laodicea next week, and then John Sherrill's going to come on the 30th to bring the word. I think he was here in July, if I remember. He was online in July because we met online. But one of the things that we're discussing is trying to make sure that I'm faithful to not expending myself as much as possible. So I'm trying to space out my preaching schedule as well, so I don't do too many consecutive weeks because I only have so much energy for the week to work. So I want to make sure I do the things I'm supposed to do other than preaching. So, but he'll come on the 30th, and looking forward to having him. He's the lead pastor of Fifth Reformed Church in Grand Rapids, who was our mother church that planted us, and he's been a great mentor and friend to me. So we might have him back and forth. I've invited a couple other people as well in September and October, so we'll see how that goes. So Revelation chapter 3, we're in Philadelphia today, and if you're with us and you're like, wait, what about the letter before that? If you're paying attention, Pastor Emmett Brown in July actually did Sardis on the July 19th, so you can go back to our YouTube channel and watch that. And then we kind of, since we were kind of out and about and I was out on vacation, we've been kind of back and forth skipping around, so we're kind of making up for that. So we are at Philadelphia, which is verse 7 of chapter 3. And just to let you know about this series, if you're new with us or you're watching online for the first time, we're really interested in asking questions about what would this letter mean to the people that first heard it. Because there's a lot of stuff that revolves. We'll get into that today a little bit. That revolves around Revelation that I think is a little bit misunderstood, or I don't say misinterpreted might be the word. I think it's a strong word, but I would say in this case today, yes. But we really want to understand what it means to the people originally, because that gives us a lot of insight on what God might be saying to us now. So let's read this, starting in verse 7, the church in Philadelphia. Jesus says this, "And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and had not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." Will you pray with me? God, I just ask again, like last week, that my words would be your words. More ask, God, just to give me a supernatural sense of energy and strength in proclaiming your scriptures, to proclaim the truths that you have revealed to me in my heart and revealed to so many others. God, I pray that it would spur us on to love and to good deeds, that it would spur us to walk in the midst of this pandemic, Lord, with confidence. Lord, also with an eye for the realistic, with grace, with mercy. God, also, but with challenge of recognizing things in ourselves that might keep us from being closer to you. And God, I even pray this morning for anyone listening who may not really know you personally. I pray that today they would see you for who you are, that you love us unconditionally, Lord, that you are constantly drawing them to yourself. Give us ears to listen to what you had to proclaim to us in the name of Jesus. And everybody said, amen. So have any of you ever been through a natural disaster event at all? Like a hurricane or an earthquake or a tornado or something like that? I went through a tornado when I was 6 years old, like a full-fledged F4 tornado. And I actually had like so much of this story written out. I had to cut a lot of it because I think I would just bore you to death. But I was 6 years old, and it was a little town in Ohio. And I remember I was taking a nap on the floor in the middle of the afternoon, and I woke up to this really horrendous sound. And the only way I could describe it as a 6-year-old was a plane and a train and an automobile all crashing together, and like they all crashed. And there was a big boom, and I heard a lot of noise, and I didn't know what was going on, but I just remember the sky was dark, and it was 3:30 in the afternoon, like dark as night. And I remember my grandmother flying out of the bedroom, and I lived with my grandparents during my elementary years, and they both flew out of the bedroom. My grandma, especially, my grandma was not the most agile person in the world. She liked to eat a lot, let's just say that. And I never saw her move so fast in my entire life, and I was also half conscious because I was just waking up from a nap, but she ran out screaming. I don't know what she was saying, but she grabbed my arm and she dragged me across the floor to the kitchen. Now, the entire house we had was carpet. Even our kitchen was carpet, which was weird. I don't know why they had carpet in the kitchen, but I'm like getting rug burned the whole way down on the way to the cellar. She whips me around. I'm like a rag doll, literally. I didn't know she was so strong. She just flies me through. She whips me around down the stairs, and my head just go right into the wall, just like boom. And I'm like kind of like delirious. Like I'm still waking up, but I'm getting worse. I don't know if I had a concussion or whatever. And then I'm being dragged down the cellar stairs. They're wooden with like the little pads so you don't slip. They're not soft. There's boom, 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 boom. And literally that's what it is. Like when you drag something down the stairs, like that's how she's dragging me down the stairs. Not my sister though, which I didn't. She was 2 years younger. That she was like carrying her. I don't know why she's doing that. She's dragging me down the stairs, and literally like an Olympic hammer throw. You know what a hammer throw is? That little chain on the ball and the chain, they spin around and woo, they like fling it. That's what she did with me, except she did that and swung me around the stairs and threw me under the stairs. And all she said was, "Get in the position now!" And thankfully I knew what that meant because we just had a tornado drill at my school like that week. And it was tornado season, but so I got in the position. You get in your knees and you crouch down. You put your hands behind your neck, and I just ducked there. And all I heard was all this like crunching and noise and crashing. I didn't know what was going on. The house was shaking. Grandma was screaming. They're trying to turn on the battery-operated radio to listen to what's going on, and it was absolutely nuts. I remember after it was over, it was like 15, 20 minutes of this, and then we went outside, and I'll never forget what I saw after we walked outside, which was complete destruction everywhere. Our entire main street was just obliterated. All the houses, they were like maybe 4 6 feet apart from one another. Literally, were just all shredded wood. I mean, it was like literally there's no houses standing. It was all shredded wood, just like someone literally like put them in a wood chipper and left them there. And our whole business district was like completely obliterated. Our grocery store, which had just upgraded to a new brick building, basically they had rebuilt the store from this nasty wood to this real nice brick. And they just reopened like, I don't know, 2-3 months before that. Half of it was caved in. Beside it, there was a 3-story apartment building. It was about, I'd probably say 4 or 5 rooms across, maybe 3 stories building, just a big building. It was completely gone. No shreds, nothing. It was literally the imprint of the building. It was gone. We found out it was dumped off in a cornfield about 2 or 3 miles from there. That's how powerful the tornado was. And it had just wrecked our town. I remember our garage had the picket fence posts, like those wooden, pointy ones, sticking like into the side of the garage, just like like someone threw a javelin like full speed and they just stuck in the side. I remember the craziest sight was our neighbor's house 2 doors down was completely destroyed. There's a barber shop right next door to our house which was destroyed as well, which was only 6 feet from our house. So the tornado was like, I found out was doing this little zigzag on our street and missed our house by like 4, 5, 6 feet. So obviously we're really grateful for that, but I also remember seeing a piece of hay straw sticking on either side of a telephone pole. It had gone through the telephone pole and was just sticking out either side. That's how powerful the winds were. Now, why in the world would I tell you a story like that? It sounds kind of, what does that have to do with the book of Revelation? It's the end times! No. Well, it is the end times. I've already told you that. The end times is now. It's happening. It's been happening for a while. But the city of Philadelphia, believe it or not, had to deal with natural disasters, except theirs was in the form of earthquakes. And they actually had a major earthquake in the year 17 AD. And it completely obliterated the town. People had to flee to the outskirts of town. They lived in these temporary dwellings. And for those of you who have followed this series long enough, Roman architecture has these huge temples, these huge buildings made of marble. All of that comes crashing down. And this isn't something that happened like every great once in a while. This was a frequent happening. It's almost like living, for some people's experience of living in Los Angeles, right? It's there's earthquakes that happen there a lot. The one in 17 was a major one. But after that, they would constantly have minor earthquakes, and the people of Philadelphia always felt uncertain and uneasy about their own physical location. They were always on edge. And we'll get to when we get near the end of the teaching, we'll kind of bring that home a little bit more, but I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through this letter, because there's some context there that's really important for that as some of Jesus' words here. But we want to give a little bit more background on Philadelphia. We talked last week about Thyatira, which was a couple letters before. But if you remember last week in Thyatira was a city that, and by the way, for those of you who are on site, I actually made slides today, and we don't have a projector here, so you'll have to go online to look at it. So the people online are like, yeah, we get to see something you don't. So I have slides of some of the stuff you can look at later, but I'll also post them on our website too. But Thyatira was well known for their trade guilds. They were, the best bronze workers, silver workers, like I said last week, and every single trade had a guild, had a club that you were a part of if you were a business owner. Now, Philadelphia also had similar things, not as pronounced as Thyatira. Thyatira was the best one, but Philadelphia basically ran the same way as Thyatira did. It's kind of interesting because you think we're talking about a church in Pennsylvania right now. No. There's actually 2 Roman brothers, and I can't remember their names. They're really weird names. I won't try to pronounce them to bore you, but they were brothers, and that was where the city's name came from in relationship to the brothers. The city of brotherly love is what Philadelphia means. And what was interesting about Philadelphia, every city has their unique niche. Philadelphia was known for their great grape crops. And for those of you that know anything about grapes and grape crops and vineyards, you probably know what that means. What do they make with grapes? Welch's grape juice. No, they probably do that too, but wine, right? So Philadelphia was well known for making great wine and alcohol. And so, of course, that was the major product of their place. And so every single city in this region had a patron god or deity that they worshipped, or several. Philadelphia had theirs as well. And for those of you that know enough or have listened to this series, you might remember this name, but the patron god of Philadelphia was a god named Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of wine. And Dionysus, we didn't really talk to him about too much last time. Dionysus was probably the most, for all the times in this series we've talked about sexual immorality, Dionysus was the prime god for that. All the ceremonies, all the things that happened with Dionysus were revolved around that in a lot of their worship. And Philadelphia was rampant this way. And Philadelphia was just like a lot of these cities in the Asia Minor region, that, like I said, are very dedicated to Rome, more than even a lot of cities near Rome itself. Philadelphia was actually called Little Athens. And what that meant was they were basically evangelists for Greek philosophy. They called them Hellenists, so Hellenism, if you've heard that before. They were the evangelists for Hellenism. And so they worshiped the god Dionysus. They were great evangelists, and the thing about this city, I mean, this is the kind of city that I'm trying to. There was a place in Ohio that I remember called Yellow Springs. It was near the Dayton area. It was a very eclectic place, very artsy, very nonconformist kind of place. That was Philadelphia. Philadelphia was filled with theaters and games and festivals and artists and non-rational thinkers and creatives. And they celebrated those types of things. In fact, they kind of pushed people to not think as logically and rationally and more emotionally. And Dionysus fit that really well, because Dionysus was all about getting in touch with the dark parts of who you are, getting in touch with all the primal urges that you would have. In fact, some images of Dionysus were of half goat and half human being, to signify that, yes, we're human, but part of being human is giving in to the fundamental primal urges that we have. Have you heard that someone say that before? To kind of give in to primal urges, or who we are, kind of fundamentally, like the kind of the animal and beast within us, like there's certain tendencies that way. That was Dionysus. That's who he was. And that's what the city of Philadelphia celebrated. So you can imagine what a challenge that would be to the Christians that were there. So we're gonna dive through the text and unpack a lot of things today. And of course, like always, there's lots of things I can't tell you that I try to cut out, and I still probably put too much in there. But let's kind of walk through it. So the beginning of it, we talked about every letter is a prophetic oracle. It's a certain type of way of writing that is familiar to people who are familiar with the scriptures. And at the beginning of a prophetic oracle, they always talk the first thing about who God is and what he's like. In this case, Jesus, because Jesus is speaking directly. So he says this about himself. He says that he's the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David and a door that will open and never be shut. So there's all these things that, I told you before, Revelation has more references to the Old Testament than any other book in the Bible, in the New Testament. And I feel bad I can't talk about all those things, and sometimes I don't even talk about any of them, depending on the letter. But today we're going to a little bit. So if you do have Bibles, and if you're at home, good for you. We're going to have it on the screen. Isaiah chapter 22. I want you to turn there for a moment. And I'm just going to read this story out of Isaiah chapter 22, because when he says the key of David, this is the story that comes to mind when you say the key of David. That actually means something to someone who's listening to this. Isaiah chapter 22, we're going to start in verse 15 of that book. And let me take a drink and get a breath. It says, "Thus says the Lord God of hosts, come, go to the steward, to Shebna, who is over the household, and say to him, what have you to do here, and whom have you here, that you have cut out here a tomb for yourself? Who cut out a tomb on the height and carve a dwelling for yourself in the rock? Behold, the Lord will hurl you away violently. O you strong man, he will seize firm hold on you and whirl you around and around," sounds like my grandmother, the tornado, "and throw you like a ball into a wide land. There you shall die, and there shall be your glorious chariots, your shame of your master's house. I will thrust you from your office, and you will be pulled down from your station. In that day I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your robe, and I will bind your sash on him, and will commit your authority to his hand. And he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to the house of Judah. And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David." There's that term, right? "He shall open, and none shall shut. And he shall shut, and none shall open. And I will fasten him like a peg in a secure place, and he will become a throne of honor to his father's house. And they will hang on him the whole honor of his father's house, the offspring and issue, every small vessel, from the cups to all the is it flagons or flagons? I say flagons. In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, the peg that was fastened in a secure place will give way, and it will be cut down and fall, and the load that was on it will be cut off, for the Lord has spoken." So I'm not going to get too much into explaining all the story, because I don't want to take too much time, but when you hear the key of David, this is the story that comes to mind. There's a lot of stuff in Isaiah that comes from the book of Revelation. So it talks about this person named Shebna. It looks like Shebna with a B, but it's actually pronounced Shebna, who's over the household of Israel. In turn, he's like the governor of the palace, or maybe a function similar to today would be like almost being like the prime minister, in a sense. He's kind of got that function. And we hear about this person named Eliakim. It looks like Eli A. Kim, Eliakim, who's called by God to take over. So directly called by God to take over, which is significant. And Shebna's role was similar of what you think of the prime minister, and he was the administrative authority of the palace. Basically, all the authority of what happens in the palace runs through this one person. That's how much power this person has. They're responsible for both the spiritual and material well-being of the entire nation. That was their role. It's a pretty significant role. And the key here is to understand what happens with a palace administrator, what in reference to the key of David in the book of Revelation. Because, see, the palace administrator holds the absolute authority to determine who meets with the king or not. If you want to meet the king of Israel, it goes through the palace administrator. They have all the keys, or the key, to see the king, and only them. And so the reference in the story is talking about this person, Shebna, who is basically abusing the authority, because, see, the person who's a palace administrator is supposed to be a person of high integrity, is a person who's supposed to put the welfare of the nation, both spiritually and materially, above themselves. And we learn quickly that Shebna was not doing that. In fact, he was building for himself a fine rock tomb, which signified that he wanted to be remembered long after he died. That's what you did. You built these elaborate tombs. It's like going to a cemetery and seeing these like mausoleums, right? That's what he was doing. He was spending his time doing that. We know he had chariots, which is a sign. That's usually like the tank of the ancient world. So he had a tank, and he kind of rode around in his tank and building a mausoleum for himself. That's what he was doing. So God calls him out through the prophet Isaiah, and he says, no, I'm going to call up Shebna. It says Shebna was a father. That meant he actually considered the well-being of his people above and beyond himself. So we take that story back to the book of Revelation, because Jesus says, I'm the holy and true one who has the key of David, referencing this passage in Isaiah, that the governor of the palace has the key of David, which is the line of the Messiah. In other words, the line of the true Israel is the house of David. And so Jesus has the same power as God himself. So much like when we talked about Smyrna a few weeks back, there were local Jewish synagogues in each of these cities, right? And we found out in Smyrna that the Jewish people had a hard time at getting in the synagogue because they were believers in Jesus. There were the people in the local Jewish synagogue who were able to worship freely in the Roman Empire, and only them. They would not let these Jewish Christians in. They did not believe Jesus was the Messiah, so therefore they wouldn't let them in, and they actually persecuted them. And the same thing was happening in Philadelphia at the Jewish synagogue. And much like the synagogue, they were in cahoots with the Romans because there was a lot more money to be had because of kind of compromising to some of the worship of the Romans that the synagogue would do. It also had influence on the economy. So if you were actually in line with some of the stuff that the Romans did, then they would give you specific advantages or let you slide by with things or what have you. That's what the synagogue was doing. But these Jewish Christians weren't doing that. And so they got excommunicated from the synagogue as well in Philadelphia. And why that's significant is because the text is very, very strong about making statements about that circumstance. Because there's a hint here of who the true Israel is and who is not. And what's interesting, the other crazy thing about Philadelphia is that the church in Philadelphia was mainly composed of Gentiles, meaning non-Jewish people. Most of the church was Gentiles. And so the traditional Jewish people, they weren't very much fans of the Gentiles in their history. But there were many Gentiles being converted to Jesus, who were coming to Jesus and showing signs of the Holy Spirit. But they were getting excommunicated from the synagogue, which is the only place of worship that they knew to go to. And I want to be careful here because this text, just like other texts in Revelation, have been used over history to preach anti-Semitic views. And you can imagine that, especially if you're mostly Gentile church, you can think, well, the traditional Jewish peoples, they don't, they're not really God's people. We are, and you can get into that battle of who's better. This isn't a passage about who is better and who is not, although Jesus is addressing who is the true Israel in this text. So Jesus holds the key of David. He's the absolute authority of who gets to meet the king, in this case, God, and Jesus is a part of that. And that those who follow Jesus' authority are part of the true Israel. And that those who deny Jesus as Messiah is not part of the true Israel. So there's a statement in that. But the thing is about who is part of the true Israel is it's anybody who is a follower of Jesus. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you've been to church all your life or not. If you are a follower of Jesus, you are part of the true Israel that God has called out. That's really encouraging to a group of people who don't know a lot of the background and history of the Jewish faith and of Christianity. And so they got shut out. That also shut them out from some of the benefits of the government. And Jesus says, look, I'm opening the door to the true synagogue that no one can ever shut, which they were experiencing in Philadelphia. They go to the synagogue, they shut the doors on them. But Jesus says, no, the true synagogue, those doors will never be shut to you because you're with me. That's pretty encouraging, right? It's an encouraging word to this church. Now, here's the other thing that's interesting. He says that the church has little power later on in the text. What does that mean, little power? It's really a phrase, and for those of you particularly as a part of this church community, you'll like this. It means that the church in Philadelphia is significantly small in number. You have a little power, meaning you don't have a huge presence in this city because you're not very big, but it doesn't mean you're not mighty, because obviously he calls out some good things in them. That the limited witness that they do have is actually bearing fruit. And then it gets really crazy here. In the last part of verse 9, let's go to that real quick. Revelation chapter 3. Are you hanging with me okay so far? I can't tell online. I'm not in the chat window, but hopefully you are. Just hang with me. We'll draw all this together at the end. But it's good to understand this because it has relevance to the people that are listening and to us. He says, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan. We've heard that phrase before if you've been this series in another letter, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Meaning they say they're Jews, but they're lying because they're not really Jews because they don't believe in me, basically. I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I've loved you. Now, it's easy to look at something like that, and if you're really like starving for attention, you're like, hey, come bow and worship me now, you people who are oppressors. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, it's easy to look at it that way, but that's not the way Jesus looks at it here. Because there's so many texts in the Hebrew Bible that allude to the Gentiles being in that group of people. In fact, I put it on the screen, I believe, but there's 3 references, and for those of you here, I'll say these, but you can look at it later if you watch the video. Isaiah 45:14, 49:23, and 60 verse 14. So 45:14, 49:23, and 60:14. There's some references there where the Gentiles are the ones who are going to bow before Israel's feet because they are the chosen people of God in the last days. But yet here in Philadelphia, who Jesus is speaking to, this mostly Gentile church, it seems the roles are reversed. Doesn't it? In a mostly Gentile church, Jesus says to them, they're going to bow and worship at your feet. And that is reference to Isaiah, which says the Gentiles will worship at Israel's feet, who are an oppressed people in the text of Isaiah. And yet, here's this church, Jesus telling you hold fast to me, then they're going to be bowing at your feet. The authority will be with you. The people who are part of the true Israel, the people that follow the Messiah, and the Messiah is him, is Jesus Christ. Very, very strong words. You can see how this can be used for anti-Semitic means aggressively. So let's move on to verse 10. Because, man, this is a doozy here, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I try to cover as much as I can. But verse 10, we at the beginning of the series, I mentioned how the book of, base of the series that most people think about with this, are we in the end times? They think of all these books and movies, and for me personally, I remember several years back, I read this novel series called Left Behind. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. The Left Behind series is like 12 books, and it basically imagines the end of the world. And basically the book of Revelation is the kind of subtext of the series. And that particular book series is based off a particular theological posture called dispensationalism, which is where the concept of the rapture comes from. Have you heard of the rapture before, even the word rapture? Some people who play video games think of a particular video game, but that's not what I'm talking about. The rapture is the idea that before the Great Tribulation, meaning there's going to be these, they say 7 years of great trial and hard things, which all the stuff at the end of the world, all these movies get made of, are about, that all the believers in Jesus will basically get taken from the earth to not experience that. Well, at least that's pre-tribulation rapture. There's different types of theories on that, but most people kind of subscribe to that way. And I said at the beginning of this series, and some of you even still to this day might think I'm heretical in saying this, that the rapture is not, in my opinion, taught in Scripture. It's actually a concept that came from the 19th century, and I actually walked through that history in the first week of this series, so you can go back and watch that if you get a chance. But this verse right here is one of the major texts that is used to talk about the end times and the rapture and the Great Tribulation in verse 10. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. They talk about the hour of trial and the great tribulation that's to come, and people get thrown into this. So I'm going to present something that it's not any new news to people or even scholars. Maybe some of you have never heard this kind of stuff before, but just kind of to tell you why I strongly disbelieve in this and what I think this might be saying as we go through this. Because here's the idea about the rapture. The rapture assumes that we are going to avoid great suffering. If you think about it, right? I mean, the Great Tribulation is supposed to come at the end and save us from this humongous, horrible, and cataclysmic events that are going to happen on this earth. Like hell's going in a handbasket and all these movies, that come out that kind of display what could happen. The asteroids coming to hit the earth, the aliens are going to come, there's a new ice age, you name it, whatever it is, right, is going to come. But it assumes the idea that there's extreme suffering that will happen near the end that Christians will be spared of. And you have to remember, we've talked about this with the Jewish concept of time and numbers, especially in the Bible, that they are more qualitative than quantitative, meaning they were more about the meaning of it rather than the actual counting of it. So when they say 7 years or an hour or 7 days or whatever, it doesn't usually mean the actual number. It's a symbol that points to something else, right? So, for example, in John 21, when it says the disciples caught 153 fish after Jesus told them to throw their nets on the other side of the boat, 153 was at the time that was written in John, the understood amount of nation states in the world. So you can imagine the imagery that John is saying by saying they caught 153 fish, meaning you're going to catch disciples from all over the known world. So that's what I mean by qualitative over quantitative. Will there be 7 years of actual tribulation? Well, 7 in the Jewish mind is the number of completion. There were 7 days in creation, right? It's a number of everything's complete. And John uses the phrase, you have kept my word. And the word keep in the New Testament, when the word keep is used, the original word, it always is used to mean keeping God's commandments. That's usually what that means when they use the word keep. And there's only one other time in the New Testament that this phrase, you have kept my word, is used. And ironically, it's by John again in his gospel. John 17, if you read that, in verse 15, during Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane before he gets arrested, he says this, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. In this whole text, he's talking about what does it mean to keep his word and to be in the world but not of the world. But when you subscribe to the rapture, you're going to be taken out of it. You're escaping the world, escaping the great suffering. And Jesus says, the only other time this is mentioned, this phrase, I do not ask that you take them out of the world. I don't ask that you make them escape what's happening, but that you keep them from the evil one. He doesn't pray for escape. He prays for protection from the evil one. He doesn't say they're not going to suffer. The entire Bible is written from a group of people whose name means suffering and struggle. Israel means struggle and wrestling, right? That's the story of their people. There's no way a Jewish person would say they're trying to avoid struggling. That's the antithesis of who they are. So that's not what John's talking about escaping. It's talking about having spiritual protection during the time of great suffering. If you continue to hold on to my name, I'm going to spare you from the hour of trial, the time of suffering. And it doesn't mean they're not going to suffer physically, because Philadelphia was persecuted. We have great documented evidence of that. It was persecuted. So he doesn't promise they won't suffer there, but it does give them a purpose and a hope beyond the suffering. The end of the story, right? Just like a lot of these other letters. I love what Wes Howard Brooke says about this in his book, Unveiling Empire. It's on my reading list, which, by the way, I updated with another book. I updated that list in case you were looking at that online or our live page. But he says this about Revelation that and time that is so vital for us to understand, because this is where we get really, I think, misdirected with interpreting Revelation. He says this: Revelation reveals I'll explain what this word means in a second. Revelation reveals a bifurcated universe in which ordinary life and divine life coexist at all times and places. Revelation reveals a bifurcated universe in which ordinary life and divine life coexist at all times and places. One of my professors at seminary, that was his favorite word, bifurcate. It's just a fun word to say. If he was listening, he'd be very proud of that right now. Bifurcate. It basically means this. It's basically saying when you try to separate things into either or. It's either black or white. It's either this or that. It's bifurcating. And what's interesting to us as Westerners, that our concept of time, the way we view time, and the way the ancient people view time are completely two different things. So for us, we look at the past, present, and future as three distinct things, and the present, to a Western mind, and you may not think about it this way, but it's what we do. The present basically becomes a dashed line that separates the past and the future. And it's a very small kind of moment, and they're all distinct and separate. And so a lot of times we talk about the future, about this looking beyond this dashed line all the time. In the ancient world, that concept never existed. In the ancient world, they viewed past, present, and future as coexisting together, that they're connected. In other words, earth, the life they're living now, and heaven, as Wes Howard Brooks says, are coexisting together at the same time. I've described before in the past, if you've been around me long enough, that heaven is not some other place detached from this earth, which is what the rapture likes to allude to, that it's somewhere else outside of this earth, like kind of like where angels are playing harps and, sitting on clouds or whatever. That's a Greek notion of understanding heaven. But heaven's more like a curtain. It's like it's right in front of you in a curtain, and you just open the curtain and you realize that heaven is right beyond the curtain, but right there in front of you in another realm, coexisting at the same time. And you have moments where you experience heaven on earth, and that's what Jesus prays for in his Lord's Prayer, right? You remember that prayer? For those of you who have been in church long enough, Jesus prays for earth, for heaven to come to earth, right? He doesn't pray to leave this earth. You remember the prayer? He prays for earth, or for heaven to come here. But it's not like it's somewhere else. It's actually it's like, hey, will you show a little bit of the curtain? Will you bring it here? And in the end of all things, the curtain's going to be completely wide open, where we're going to see everything for the unveiling. What apocalyptus means, right? unveiling, uncovering. The book Revelation, that's the name Revelation in English. It's an unveiling and uncovering. That's heaven. Heaven's going to be unveiled. That's what heaven and earth are like. That's what time is like to the ancient world, to people that are seeing this. So when you look at this verse and you're thinking the hour of trial, and you're thinking like a time in the future, to the Jewish mind and to the people, the ancient world's mind, it's not just about the future. It's about now too. It's both and. I like to use that a lot. It's a both and. Already, not yet. And it has severe implications on how you live. Because when you live for only the future and waiting to escape this place, you don't have to worry about the dash line, because it's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway. There's going to be a great tribulation. God's going to obliterate the earth and get rid of all the bad stuff, and then we're going to fly away anyway. There's even a song that talks about that. I know some of it's your favorite song, I'll Fly Away, but it actually teaches the rapture. It's not theologically correct. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it's true. That's what the song is about. We're not going to escape. In fact, the end of this, we'll get to this eventually. At the end of Revelation, the story is heaven comes here and God stays here forever. There's no escaping at all. If you watch the story of the Bible, God is becoming more permanently present in the earth as the story moves forward. So the whole teaching of dispensationalism, which is not just about the rapture, but it's a big part of it, it teaches about escape. It teaches about, it makes you create almost a bubble, we talked about the Christian bubble, right? The subculture to separate yourself from the rest of the world, because they're just heathen and they're just going to go their way and they're going to destroy themselves, but we're going to get taken out of it, thankfully, before it comes. No, there's nothing. None of these letters in Revelation ever promises that things are going to be okay in their current circumstances. They actually guarantee, hey, you're going to suffer. It's guaranteed if you're following me. Jesus says that in his gospel too. You're going to suffer. So it's not about escaping suffering. It's saying, look, I'm going to protect you from the evil one, meaning, hey, you hold on to me. You're not going to get deceived into following the ways of this world. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot, but it's a really important concept to understand. And I know I spent a lot of time on it, but there's a lot. We've been programmed so much to believe that, and there's a lot more to it that's there. And so here's the question I want to land on, because I know some of you are like, okay, what's going on with all this stuff? It's a really small church in Philadelphia who's got a big mission that God wants them to fulfill. All right? And he says, like he's last week that we with Thyatira, he says, I'm coming soon, verse 11. Hold fast to what you have. We've heard those words before, right? Hold fast. That was the big message last week. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The crown was the sign of victory at a games, which they're familiar with because they had a lot of them. The crown that was a symbol of victory. No one's going to steal your victory. Jesus says, hold fast to me and no one's going to steal your victory. And then he says, to the one who conquers, there's that again, every single letter, the one who conquers. What does it look like to be someone who holds fast to me and overcomes? Here's all this stuff, and he names all this stuff. Can you imagine? You listen to this, and you're a city that goes through earthquakes all the time, and you're always unstable, and buildings fall, and they rebuild them, and they fall again. And Jesus says, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. There's a sense of stability with that, right? Yeah, all around you, things may be crumbling all around you. And you may right now, and this is where I think it means so much right now at this time, some of you feel like everything is crumbling all around you, especially during this time. It's just been really difficult. And Jesus says, listen, hold fast so no one will seize your victory, because you know who's on the throne. I'm on the throne. And you're going to be inscribed on the pillar of the temple of God, whose door is never shut. It's always open and will never be destroyed. For a very small church in this town of Philadelphia, it's very encouraging words. But they're going to be tested. They're going to be tested. And it's interesting when you talk about that word test, and this is where I want to land the plane. I guess the question I would ask is, does God test us? Do you think he does that? Because we talk about the suffering thing, right? Like, I told you, like, God doesn't let you avoid suffering, especially if you're going to follow him. It's promised. So is that a test for us? Does God actually test us? I don't know about you, and here's the skeptic in me. Before I was a Christian, I was a skeptic. I guess I still am in some ways. I like asking a lot of questions. When I think of the question, God testing us, I look at it in a way it's like God being mean. Like he's just some vindictive dictator up on high who wants to test his people to see if they're really devoted. And he kind of has a little fun with us. I've had a lot of friends who talk about God that way when he says he tests us. And I think you know this right now if you're a part of the church. The church is being tested right now heavily in this country. There's no doubt about it. But the fact is, the church has always been tested. It always has. This word test is such an interesting word, though. Because I think right now, one of the things I'm seeing with the church is, there's almost a pruning in some way that's happening during this pandemic. Of course, it's a lot easier to watch us at home. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's why we're doing it. But it's easy for people to walk away from connection to the community. And I think a lot of times, if church has become, and church is not, remember, we've said this many times, church is not a building in the Bible. The church is a group of people. It's never mentioned as a building. It's the church itself as a building. There's a temple, but the church is mentioned as the people of God. But if the church, if being a part of the church is just another extracurricular activity, just like sports or just like any other hobby that you have, it's easy to just disconnect during this time more than any, right? And people have. And people have here too. It's happened. And I think there is a test for some. I think there is a pruning that's going on with the church. And a lot of people in church land are having all sorts of discussions. How do we keep people coming to church? And what they mean by that is like, how do you keep people from coming to Sunday worship? We got to meet physically on site. We got to do this and that. And they all focus on this. And we all know, and Jim Henderson over here, he says it so well every time, that the church is about 7 days a week. It's about the everyday life of a Jesus follower. That's what it means to live the life of the church. And we're being tested right now. And I when I think about this, when I think of testing, and the Bible does this a lot, I like to use the imagery of fire. And I think this helps me understand it a little better. You know about fire, right? It's fun. I mean, for most people. Most of the guy friends I know who like to play with fire, or maybe I'm just talking about myself. Anyway, so fire is interesting because it has different results to it, if you think about it. First of all, the one that we know, it destroys, right? Fire destroys. For those of you that had your house burned down or things burned down, that you know the destruction of this. Think about the wildfires that have happened all over the world. I think about Australia, I think about California, especially, that happens frequently. I remember Yellowstone a few years back. I mean, it's vicious, right? But in the Bible, what's really interesting about fire is that it has another function, and this is the primary function of fire in the Bible. And that's that it refines. It may destroy in a sense, but it destroys all the impurities of the thing, and out what comes is the true and real and pure thing that's left. That's what fire does a lot in the Bible. And so the question is, does God test us? I want to tell you today that the answer is unequivocally yes, 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 of course he does. But not because he's looking for some kind of divine satisfaction of some evil man in the sky. It's actually for us. I mean, I know my friends who are still questioning say what loving God would let this happen? What loving God would allow hell to exist? I heard that question from a friend this week. Why would God allow this to happen and this child to die and all sorts of questions, right? Why would God allow my friend to get COVID and die from COVID? I mean, all sorts of questions that really put God to the test in a lot of ways, right? I even think about the hell question that, especially with the concept of time, hell is a present and future reality. It's connected to the ancient mind. That's a thing you probably can think about sometime. Why would God do this? I mean, they're all legitimate questions. They're not invalid questions. And we think testing might mean that God just does the bad things to us to see if we're loyal, that he's the cause of all this. And when we view the fire as God destroying what is good, is a lot of what testing seems to mean to some. And yet in the scriptures, how many stories and images there are of a God who walks through the fire with his people? It's already been referenced to in this book. The testing doesn't destroy you, it refines you. In fact, it really does both, right? It destroys the things within us that keep us from having closer intimacy with God. It destroys all the things that aren't walking in the light of Christ, and reveals that which is genuinely faithful within us. It's to show us, the testing is to show us our own faithfulness. God already knows. He doesn't need proof, but you do. This very small church was being ostracized by the people that were supposed to be the light of the world. The empire, the world they live in, the Roman Empire, demanded they embrace a life that's not faithful to Jesus. And Jesus says, hold fast. No one's going to seize your victory. Because, see, there's a posture that you can have in testing. You can view it as a fire that only destroys. And when you do that, what happens is you ask all those questions and you answer those questions to God. Like, why would God allow this to happen? Is, well, because the answer can't be to my satisfaction, and I view God as a divine child abuser or whatever you want to fill in the blank with, then they leave. I can't do this. No, I'm not going to subscribe to this. I had a couple friends tell me that this week. And that's a view of fire destroying. There is a test. And Revelation says here in this letter, there's a test to the people that are there in this hour of trial. Or, for followers of Jesus, and the invitation is, or will you look at the fire as refining? Proverbs 17:3 says this, the crucible is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, and the Lord tests hearts. Peter says this in his first epistle, chapter 1, starting verse 3. He has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes through, it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. No matter if it's an earthquake in Philadelphia, a tornado in Cardington, Ohio, or the COVID-19 pandemic and all the issues that come with it, what is the fire doing to you? Because you can choose what you want to think about that. God says that he is refining those he loves. He tests hearts to show you about your own faithfulness to God. And for those of you that think, well, I don't have any faith, all of you have faith in something. Every single person that exists on this planet has faith. You put your faith in something, whether a belief system or a person or a movement or you name it. We put our belief in something. Jesus says, I am the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I am the Messiah. I am the true Israel. I am the one who is on the throne. This whole book is talking about that. Because, see, this pandemic is a fire, right? It is. And I know I'm going longer. Maybe it's because I've been off too long. Who knows? So thanks for being patient. But you can let that destroy you right now, or you can let it refine you. How do you know it's refining you? What does that look like? I mean, is this pandemic driving you to your knees in prayer? I don't know. It is me. Is it asking you to let go of control of things that you can't control? For me, I mean, right now, what I've experienced the last 5 weeks is like my prime lesson right now, right? I can't even believe I'm talking this long. I'm probably going to feel horrible after we're done, but whatever. I'm just going to keep preaching. But like, I can't even stand up for more than 30 minutes. I can't even like sit up for more than 3 hours right now. And, you know, I tried this live streaming thing back here, right? And I joke about it, that if I touch a button, everything breaks, and it's true. But do you think it might be God saying, you know, Mike, you should just like let go of that stuff, right? There's other people that need. In fact, Mike, you probably should think about that a little more. I know this man over here, Jim Henderson, since the day I walked in the door, has been telling me that through and through all the time in like 50 different ways, right? And I have been, but God's like, do it more. I need to let go. But I could choose to say, you know what? I'm a horrible pastor. I'm not being useful. I can only work this many hours a week right now because I'm miserable, blah, blah, blah. And I can do that. That's the fire destroying me. Or I can say the fire is refining me and say, you know what? Maybe this is a time for me to really step back and really invest in other ways that I probably should have been doing for the last few months. Or do it more. I'm not saying I haven't been doing it. To do it more. That's refining. Does that make sense? What is the fire doing to you? What is that thing in your life right now that's difficult, that maybe God is trying to burn away some of the impurities in yourself that are keeping you from following him more closely or following him in the first place? How do you know right now? Here's a great passage. I'll end it this way. Galatians 5:16-25. I can't read it today, but it talks about the fruit of the Spirit, right? Some of you are familiar with that passage, but right before that, it talks about the fruit of the flesh. That's the only evidence we have to know if we're on the right path. Is my life exhibiting the fruit of the flesh or the fruit of the Spirit? Is my life becoming more like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control? Or is it becoming like the works of the flesh that's mentioned right before that? Envy, jealousy, more anger, dissensions, envy. There's a lot more of that list. That's how you know if the fire is refining or destroying you. If you're becoming more angry and directing that anger in destructive ways, your fruit is of the flesh. If even in the midst of stress and refining, you're becoming more joyful and peaceful and patient and kind, that's the fruit of the Spirit. That's what's happening in Philadelphia. This little small church. Shout out to the small churches, by the way. Philadelphia, woohoo. New Ground Church, woohoo. Practically like 70% of the churches in America, woohoo, right? The fruit of the Spirit or the fruit of the flesh? Is God refining you or destroying you? How is the fire changing you? Let's pray. God, I'm just grateful for you and for what you're teaching, and I'm grateful for a group of people who not only listen well, but pay attention to your Spirit. And so, God, just use whatever words I gave in that crazy, awesome length of time to speak some amazing truths to help us live a different way, the way of you, God, to live the fruit of the Spirit. In the name of Jesus, everybody said, amen. We'll just do the benediction today because I know I went a little more over, but hear this word of benediction. Let's all stand together. And I would invite you, even if you're at home, if you just want to put your hands out as just a posture of receiving this good word for you today as you go. May you embrace the fire. May you let the fire burn away all that destroys you and others. And may you hold fast to embracing the fire that is refining you to become more like you were made to live, more like Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And everyone said, amen. Thanks for staying around. Have a great week.